The German Shepherd was dragging himself through broken glass on a shattered leg. Every inch cost him. You could see it in the way his body shook, the way his claws scraped against twisted metal, the way blood smeared behind him in a dark trail. But he wouldn't stop. He kept pulling himself toward the unconscious old man pinned inside the overturned truck, kept pressing his nose against the man's face, kept crying, not barking, not growling, crying. Like he knew, like he understood that if he stopped moving, the man he loved was going to die alone on the side of a Colorado highway. And when Officer Harry Reeves reached into that wreck, the dog didn't bite. He looked up with eyes full of pain and begged. If this story grabs your heart, subscribe and follow this journey to the very end. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Harry Reeves saw the skid marks first. Long, black, ugly streaks cutting across the eastbound lane of I-70 and swerving hard into the guardrail. His headlights swept over the twisted metal railing, the gouged asphalt, the debris field of shattered glass and broken plastic stretching 40 yards along the shoulder. He hit his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 14. I've got a single vehicle rollover on I-70 eastbound, mile marker 217. Vehicle is overturned. Requesting fire and EMS." "Copy, Unit 14. EMS en route. Estimated arrival 12 minutes. 12 minutes. Harry grabbed his flashlight and his med kit and ran. The truck was upside down. An old Ford F-150, maybe mid-90s, dark green under the dirt and road grime. The cab was crushed on the passenger side, where it had hit the guardrail and flipped. The driver's side window was blown out, glass everywhere, and something was moving inside. Harry dropped to his knees beside the driver's window and aimed his flashlight in. Two things hit him at the same time. The first was the old man. White hair matted with blood, face pressed against the crumpled roof that was now the floor. Eyes closed, a deep gash running from his left temple into his hairline, bleeding steady. His left arm was pinned under the crushed dashboard at an angle that made Harry's stomach turn. The second was the dog. A German Shepherd, big, maybe 85 pounds. Dark sable coat covered in blood and glass fragments. His hind left leg was bent wrong, badly wrong. The kind of wrong that meant the bone had come through the skin. Harry could see the white edge of it poking through matted fur. But the dog wasn't lying still. He was moving, dragging himself across the broken glass with his front legs, pulling his destroyed hindquarters behind him, inching toward the old man's face. When he reached it, he pressed his nose against the man's cheek and licked. Once, twice, a third time. Then he made a sound that Harry Reeves would hear in his sleep for the rest of his life. Not a bark, not a whine, a cry. Low, broken, guttural. The sound of an animal who understood exactly what was happening and was begging someone, anyone, to fix it. "Easy, boy." Harry kept his voice low, steady. "Easy. I'm here to help." The dog's head swung toward him. Brown eyes locked on Harry's face. The crying didn't stop, but the dog didn't snarl, didn't bare his teeth, didn't do any of the things a wounded, panicked animal was supposed to do when a stranger reached into its space. He just looked at Harry with those eyes and cried. "I know, buddy. I know. Let me get to him." Harry reached through the window, pressed two fingers against the old man's neck. Pulse. Weak, but there. Breathing shallow. The head wound was bad. Scalp wounds always bled heavy, but this one was deep enough that Harry could see the dull white of bone underneath. Sir, sir, can you hear me? My name is Harry Reeves. I'm Colorado Highway Patrol. Help is coming. No response. The man was out cold. The dog licked the man's face again, pushed his nose under the man's jaw, then looked back at Harry with an expression so human, so desperate, that Harry felt something crack open in his chest. I'm going to get him out, Harry said to the dog. I need you to let me work, okay? Can you do that for me? The dog's tail moved. One weak thump against the crumpled metal. Like he understood. Like he was saying, yes. Harry pulled off his jacket, folded it, reached in and pressed it against the man's head wound. The bleeding slowed, but didn't stop. He needed to stabilize the neck before moving him. The angle of the body suggested spinal compression, and pulling him out wrong could mean paralysis, or worse. Dispatch, what's my ETA on fire and rescue? 9 minutes, Unit 14. He doesn't have 9 minutes. Head trauma, heavy bleeding, possible spinal. I need them here now. Understood, I'll relay. Harry turned back to the wreck. The old man still hadn't moved, but the dog had. Somehow, on that destroyed leg, he'd pulled himself another 6 inches closer to the man's face. His body was shaking violently. Shock, pain, blood loss, all of it catching up to him. But he wouldn't stop. Hey! Harry reached in with one hand and touched the dog's head. Gently, carefully. Hey boy, stay still. You're hurt bad. You need to stop moving. The dog pressed his head into Harry's palm, closed his eyes, made that sound again, that terrible, broken cry that wasn't a dog sound at all. It was grief, pure and simple. What's his name? Harry asked the unconscious man. What's your dog's name? He didn't expect an answer. He was talking to keep himself calm, to fill the silence with something other than that crying, to push back against the cold realization forming in the back of his mind that this old man might die right here on the side of the highway while his dog watched. Harry's flashlight beam swept across the cab. A wallet had fallen from the visor. He reached for it, flipped it open. Earl Whitman, Colorado driver's license, address in Grand Junction, born 1938. That made him 71 years old. There was a photo tucked behind the license. Old, creased. A younger Earl, maybe 40s, standing in desert fatigues next to another soldier. Both men grinning. Behind them, a military Humvee and a flat, sand-colored horizon that could have been Iraq or Afghanistan or any of the dozen places American soldiers had bled in the last 30 years. Harry looked at the photo, looked at Earl, looked at the dog still pressing his nose against his owner's face. He's a veteran, Harry said into the radio. The driver. He's a vet. Copy that, Unit 14. Tell rescue to hurry. Harry set the wallet down and focused on what he could control. He checked the old man's breathing again. Still there. Still shallow. The jacket was soaking through with blood. He needed a proper compression bandage, not a folded patrol jacket. He dug into his medkit. Gauze, tape, the small Israeli bandage he carried, but had never used outside training. He packed the wound as carefully as he could, working around the dog, who had positioned himself so close to Earl's head that Harry had to work around his body. I need you to move back, boy. Just a little. The dog didn't move. Come on, I can't help him if you're in the way. The dog looked at Harry. Then he looked at Earl. Then he moved. 2 inches. Enough for Harry to work, but no more. Okay, that'll do. Harry finished the bandage, checked the pulse again. Weaker. The clock in his head was screaming. Where's my rescue, dispatch? 4 minutes out, Unit 14. He's crashing. Pulse is dropping. Tell them to have blood ready. Sirens. Faint. Getting closer. Harry looked at the dog. The German Shepherd had stopped moving entirely now. His body was pressed against Earl's side, his head resting on Earl's chest. The broken leg stuck out at that sickening angle, and the trail of blood from where he'd dragged himself ran across the crumpled roof like a map of everywhere his loyalty had carried him. "You did good, boy." Harry's voice cracked. He didn't care. "You did so good. You kept him warm. You kept him alive. Now let us take over." The dog's eyes were glazing. Shock was setting in. He was running out of time, too. Headlights flooded the scene. Sirens cut the air. Doors slammed. Boots on asphalt. Voices. Organized, professional, trained. "What do we got?" "Male, approximately 71. Rollover. Head trauma. Possible spinal. Pulse weak and dropping. He's been unconscious since I arrived, approximately 8 minutes." Harry stepped back as the paramedics moved in. "And there's a dog, German Shepherd, compound fracture left hind. He's been guarding the driver the whole time. He's in shock." The lead paramedic, a woman named Torres, Harry could see the name on her jacket, dropped beside the truck and looked inside. "Jesus," she breathed. "Yeah. The dog's not going to let us pull him out." "I know." Harry moved back to the window, got down on his belly, put his face close to the dog's. "Hey boy, listen to me. These people are going to help Earl. They're going to take him to a hospital. He's going to be okay. But you have to let them work. Can you do that? Can you let them take care of him?" The dog lifted his head. Those brown eyes, dimming now, going glassy with pain, found Harry's face. One more cry. Softer this time. Almost a whisper. "I know," Harry said. "I know." He reached in, put his hand on the dog's head, stroked once, twice. "Good boy." The dog's body went limp. Not dead. Harry could see the ribs still moving, the shallow panting, but surrendered. Like he'd been holding himself together by pure willpower and had finally decided it was safe to let go. "Move now," Harry told Torres. "Move fast." They did. Backboard, C-collar, extraction in under 2 minutes. Earl Whitman came out of that truck strapped down and bleeding and still unconscious, and they loaded him onto the stretcher and ran for the ambulance. The dog moved. Harry saw it happen in his peripheral vision. The German Shepherd, broken leg and all, 85 pounds of blood-soaked, glass-cut, shock-ravaged animal, dragged himself out of the wreck and started pulling his body across the asphalt toward the stretcher. "No!" Harry scrambled to his feet. "No, boy, stop! Stop!" The dog didn't stop. His front claws scraped against the road. His destroyed leg trailed behind him. He whined with every inch, but he kept going, kept following Earl, kept closing the distance between himself and the man on the stretcher, with a determination that was beyond instinct, beyond training, beyond anything Harry had a word for. Torres stopped the stretcher, stared. The whole rescue crew stopped, stared. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. A German Shepherd with a compound fracture was army crawling across a highway to stay beside his owner. "Let him," Harry said. His voice was rough. "Put the dog in the ambulance with him." "Sir, we can't." "Put the dog in the ambulance." Harry looked at Torres. That animal just crawled through broken glass on a shattered leg to keep a dying man alive for 8 minutes. He is not getting left on the side of this road. Put him in. Torres looked at the dog, at Earl, at Harry. "Load him up," she told her crew. They lifted the dog, carefully, gently. He didn't snap, didn't struggle, just went limp in their arms and let them carry him to the ambulance and set him down beside Earl's stretcher. The moment his body touched the floor next to Earl, the dog pressed his head against the old man's hand, and that terrible crying finally stopped. Harry stood on the highway watching the ambulance doors close, red and white lights spinning, sirens firing up. The vehicle pulling away, carrying a 71-year-old man and the dog who wouldn't let him die alone. Harry's hands were covered in blood. His uniform was ruined. Glass fragments sparkled on his forearms where he'd crawled through the debris. He walked back to his cruiser, sat down in the driver's seat, put both hands on the wheel, and he sat there for a long time, staring at the blood drying on his fingers, thinking about a dog who'd chosen agony over abandonment. His radio crackled. "Unit 14, status?" Harry picked up the handset, cleared his throat. "Scene is clear, dispatch. Vehicle secured. Patient and his canine companion transported to St. Anthony's." "Copy that. Good work, Unit 14. "Good work." Harry set the handset down, looked at the photo he'd taken from Earl's wallet before the ambulance left. The creased picture of two soldiers grinning in the desert. He hadn't looked closely before, hadn't had time. But now, sitting alone on the shoulder of I-70, with nothing but silence and adrenaline crash for company, he held the photo under his dome light and studied it. The soldier on the left was a younger Earl, 40 years younger but unmistakable. Same jaw, same eyes, same lopsided grin. The soldier on the right was someone Harry knew. He knew the face, knew the smile, knew the way the man stood, left hand on his hip, right hand resting easy on his rifle, shoulders loose, eyes calm. He knew because he'd grown up looking at that face across the dinner table. Because he'd watched that man teach him to throw a baseball and change a tire and stand up straight when the world tried to push him down. Because he'd held that man's hand in a hospital room 5 years ago and watched the light leave his eyes. The soldier standing next to Earl Whitman was Harry's father. Staff Sergeant Thomas Reeves, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines. Killed in action, 2004. No, not killed in action. Harry's father had come home from that deployment, had lived another 15 years, had raised his son, had died of cancer in a VA hospital in Colorado Springs, with Harry holding his hand. But the photo was from a war zone, and the two men in it were standing together like brothers. Harry stared at the picture until his eyes burned. Then he put the cruiser in gear and drove to St. Anthony's Hospital, because a dying old man had a connection to his dead father, and Harry Reeves needed to know why. Harry made it to St. Anthony's in 14 minutes. He walked through the emergency entrance with blood still on his hands and the photograph in his breast pocket, and a question burning a hole through his chest. The intake nurse looked up, looked at his uniform, looked at the blood. "Officer, are you injured?" "Not my blood. I brought in a rollover victim about 20 minutes ago. Earl Whitman, 71. Head trauma. There was a dog with him." "The German Shepherd." The nurse's expression softened. "He's in the hallway outside trauma 2. We couldn't get him to move. The vet tech from the animal hospital down the street is on her way, but honestly, that dog isn't going anywhere until somebody tells him his owner's okay." "How's Earl?" "Surgery. That's all I can tell you." Harry nodded. "Which way to trauma 2? She pointed. Harry walked. He found Coda in the hallway. The dog was exactly where the nurse said he'd be, sitting upright outside the double doors that led to the surgical suite. Not lying down, not resting, sitting. His broken leg jutted out at that terrible angle, the bone visible through matted fur, blood pooling slowly on the linoleum beneath him. His eyes were fixed on the doors. A young nurse was crouched nearby with a bowl of water she'd clearly been trying to offer. The bowl was untouched. "He won't drink," she said when she saw Harry. "Won't eat. Won't let anyone touch the leg. He just sits there staring at those doors." Harry knelt beside the dog. Slowly, the way he'd knelt beside the truck. "Hey, boy." Coda's head turned. Those brown eyes found Harry's face, and something in them shifted. Recognition. He remembered. The man who'd reached into the wreck. The man who'd promised to help. "Earl's in surgery. The doctors are working on him." Harry kept his voice low and steady. "You did your job. You kept him alive. Now you need to let somebody look at that leg before you lose it." Coda looked at the doors, looked back at Harry. I know you want to be in there, but you can't help him if you bleed out in a hallway." The dog made a sound. Quiet. Not the terrible crying from the highway. Something softer. Exhaustion. Surrender. "That's it." Harry put his hand on Coda's head. "That's it, boy. Let us help." The vet tech arrived 11 minutes later. A woman named Dr. Angie Marsh, who took one look at Coda's leg, one look at his refusal to leave the hallway, and made a decision. "We treat him here," she told the nurse. "Bring me a crash kit, a portable X-ray if you can find one, and the strongest sedative you've got that won't stop his heart." "Here? In the hallway?" "That dog isn't moving. If I try to transport him, he'll fight, and fighting will kill him. We work where he is." They set up right there on the hospital floor. Dr. Marsh sedated Coda just enough to manage the pain without knocking him fully out. The dog's eyes stayed open the whole time, glazed, heavy, but fixed on those surgical doors. "Compound fracture. Tibia." Doctor Marsh worked fast, her hands sure. "He's been weight-bearing on this for at least 30 minutes. The pain must have been extraordinary." "He crawled through broken glass to get to his owner," Harry said. "Then he crawled across a highway to follow the stretcher." Dr. Marsh stopped, looked at Harry, looked at the dog. "On this leg?" "On that leg." She shook her head slowly. "I've been a vet for 16 years. I've never seen anything like this." "Neither have I." "He's going to need surgery. Pins, probably. And even then, he might not walk right again." She finished the temporary splint, wrapping it tight. "But he'll live. If infection doesn't set in, he'll live." "He'll walk," Harry said. He didn't know why he said it with such certainty. He just knew. Dr. Marsh raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. She finished her work, packed up her kit, and left instructions with a nursing staff for monitoring through the night. When she left, Coda was still sitting upright, still watching those doors. The sedative had dulled the pain enough that his body had stopped shaking, but his eyes never closed. Harry sat down on the floor beside him. He didn't plan to stay. He was off shift. He had paperwork to file. He had 100 reasons to leave, and only one reason to stay. And that reason was a photograph in his pocket, and a name he hadn't spoken out loud in 5 years. He pulled out the photo, held it under the hallway fluorescence. His father's face stared back at him. Young, alive, standing in desert sun with his arm almost touching Earl Whitman's shoulder. "Who are you, Earl?" Harry murmured. "How did you know my dad?" Coda shifted beside him. The dog's head came to rest against Harry's thigh. Heavy, warm, a 70-pound weight of exhaustion and trust. Harry put his hand on the dog's neck. They sat together in the hallway for 3 hours. Nurses came and went. Shift change happened around them. Someone brought Harry a cup of coffee he didn't ask for. Someone else draped a blanket over Coda. The dog didn't move. At 2:47 a.m., the surgical doors opened. A doctor in blood-streaked scrubs stepped out, mid-50s, tired eyes. The look of a man who'd been fighting a battle he wasn't sure he'd won. Harry stood. Coda's head came up. "You're the officer who brought him in?" the doctor asked. "Yes, sir. He's alive. Traumatic brain injury. Subdural hematoma. We drained it, but there's swelling. Broken clavicle. 4 fractured ribs. Internal bruising." The doctor pulled off his surgical cap. "Honestly, at his age, with this level of trauma, I wasn't sure we'd get him off the table." "But you did." "We did. He's tough. Whatever this man's been through in his life, his body knows how to take a beating." The doctor glanced down at Coda. "Is that the dog they told me about? The one who wouldn't leave?" "That's him." The doctor crouched down, looked at Coda's splinted leg, at the blood-matted fur, at the brown eyes that were locked on the open doors behind him, trying to see past him into the room beyond. "He saved that man's life," the doctor said quietly. "The body temperature data suggests Earl was losing heat fast after the crash. That dog was lying against him, keeping him warm. Without that contact, we'd be looking at a body, not a patient." Harry's throat closed. "Can the dog see him?" Harry asked. "That's against every policy we— Can the dog see him?" The doctor looked at Coda, at the splinted leg, at the trail of dried blood on the linoleum that marked everywhere the dog had dragged himself since arriving. "5 minutes, the doctor said. "And if anyone asks, I wasn't here." Harry lifted Coda, carefully, gently. The dog weighed 85 pounds of dead weight and pain, but he didn't make a sound. Just let Harry carry him through the doors and into the recovery room where Earl Whitman lay unconscious, wrapped in bandages and connected to machines that beeped with the thin, steady rhythm of a life that almost ended on a highway guardrail. Harry set Coda down beside the bed. The dog pressed his nose against Earl's hand, the one that wasn't bandaged, the one that hung slightly over the edge of the mattress. Coda licked it once, twice. Then he lay down on the cold hospital floor with his head resting against Earl's fingers, and for the first time since Harry had found them in that wreck, the dog closed his eyes. Not sleeping, just resting. Finally allowing himself to rest. Harry stood in the doorway, watching a broken dog guard a broken man, and he thought about his father, about the photograph, about 2 soldiers standing in desert heat, grinning like they just survived something that should have killed them both. His phone buzzed, a text from dispatch. "Paperwork on the I-70 rollover needs filing by end of shift." Harry pocketed the phone, pulled a chair to the corner of the room, sat down. The paperwork could wait. He wasn't leaving until Earl Whitman opened his eyes and told him why his dead father's face was in this man's wallet. At 6:23 a.m., the machines changed their tune. The beeping quickened. A monitor flickered. Earl Whitman's fingers moved. Coda's head came up instantly, alert, focused. Every muscle in his battered body locked. Harry stood. Earl's eyes opened, unfocused, wandering. The look of a man surfacing from very deep water, not sure which direction was up. His lips moved. Harry leaned closer. A whisper, barely a breath. A single word that hit Harry Reeves harder than anything had hit him since the day they folded a flag and handed it to him at his father's funeral. "Tommy." Earl Whitman's first word was Harry's father's name. And Harry stood there in that hospital room with a dead man's photograph in his pocket and a living man's voice in his ears, and understood that nothing about this night had been an accident. Tommy. The name hung in the air like smoke. Harry didn't move. Couldn't. His feet were nailed to the floor, and his lungs had forgotten how to work, and the only thing functioning in his entire body was his heart, which was hammering so hard he was sure the monitors would pick it up. Earl's eyes drifted, unfocused, still swimming in anesthesia and trauma and whatever dark place a 71-year-old brain goes when it's been cracked open and put back together. "Tommy," Earl whispered again. His hand moved, fingers reaching. "Tommy, that you?" Coda whined, pressed closer to the bed, his nose pushed against Earl's reaching fingers. "No, sir." Harry's voice came out wrecked. "It's not Tommy. My name is Harry. Harry Reeves. I'm the officer who found you on the highway." Earl's eyes found Harry's face, wandered over it. The old man's brow creased. Confusion. Recognition. Confusion again. Like he was looking at a puzzle he almost had the answer to. "Reeves," Earl murmured. "Yes, sir." "You look like him." Harry's throat closed. "Like who, sir?" "Tommy Reeves, Staff Sergeant, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines." Earl's voice was thin as paper, but the words came out with military precision, the kind of recall that lives in the bones, not the brain. "He had your jaw, your eyes. You his boy?" "I'm his son." Earl stared at him. For a long moment, nothing existed in that room except two men looking at each other across a gap that was both 30 years wide and 3 feet narrow. Then Earl's face crumbled, not slowly, not gracefully. It just broke apart, the jaw trembling, the eyes flooding, the whole weathered map of his 71 years collapsing into something raw and exposed. He pressed his hand over his face and made a sound that lived in the same register as Coda's crying on the highway. "His boy," Earl said through his fingers. "Oh God, Tommy's boy." Harry pulled the chair to the bedside, sat down. His hands were shaking, and he didn't try to hide it. "Mr. Whitman, Earl, how did you know my father?" Earl lowered his hand. His eyes were red and wet and old, and full of something Harry couldn't name. "Your father saved my life." "When?" "Fallujah, November 2004, 2nd battle." Earl's breathing hitched. The monitors beeped faster. "Our convoy got hit. IED took out the lead vehicle. We were ambushed from 3 positions. I took rounds in my left leg and my shoulder, went down in an alley. The unit pulled back to cover. I couldn't move. They left me." "They left you?" "They had to. The fire was too heavy. Standard protocol. You don't risk the squad for one man." Earl's jaw tightened. "But your father didn't follow standard protocol." Harry leaned forward. His blood was roaring in his ears. "Tommy came back for me. Alone. Middle of the firefight. Rounds snapping off the walls. RPG fire. He ran back into that alley like the devil himself was chasing him. And he threw me over his shoulders and carried me 400 yards to the extraction point." Earl's voice broke. 400 yards, Harry. With me bleeding on his back. With bullets hitting the dirt at his feet. He never slowed down. Never put me down. Never stopped. Harry couldn't speak. His father had never talked about Fallujah. Never talked about any of it. Harry had grown up knowing his dad was a Marine. Knowing he'd deployed. Knowing he'd come home different. Quieter. Heavier. Like he was carrying something invisible on his shoulders that bent him a little more each year. But Tommy Reeves had never once told his son what he'd done over there. Not one story. Not one word. "He saved me," Earl said, "and I spent the rest of my life trying to be worth saving." "Why didn't he ever—" Harry stopped. Started again. "He never mentioned you. Never mentioned Fallujah. Never talked about any of it. That's because your father was the best man I ever knew. And the best men never talk about the things that cost them the most." Earl reached down. His fingers found Coda's head. The dog pressed up into his touch. "After we came home, we stayed in contact for a while. Letters, calls. He told me about you. Told me he had a baby boy named Harry, who was going to grow up to be something special." Harry's eyes burned. Then the letters stopped. Around 2009, maybe 2010. I wrote to his last address. Letters came back. I called the number I had. Disconnected. Earl's voice dropped. I figured he'd moved on. Some men do that after war. Cut off everything connected to the bad times. I didn't blame him. He got sick, Harry said. 2008. The VA diagnosed him with stage 3 cancer. He spent the next 11 years fighting it. Earl closed his eyes. His hand stopped moving on Coda's head. He never told me. He didn't tell anyone until it was too late. That was my dad. Carried everything alone. When did he die? 5 years ago. VA hospital in Colorado Springs. I was holding his hand. The silence that followed was the heaviest thing Harry had ever sat inside of. Heavier than the moment they'd folded the flag. Heavier than the empty chair at the kitchen table. Heavier than every unanswered question he'd been carrying since the day his father died, without ever telling him about Fallujah, or Earl Whitman, or the 400 yards that changed both their lives. I didn't know, Earl whispered. If I'd known he was sick, I would have... You would have what? Been there. Earl's eyes opened, fierce now, burning through the pain and the drugs and the fog. I would have been there, Harry. A man carries you out of hell, you owe him everything. Everything. And I didn't even know he was dying, Coda whined, pushed his nose harder against Earl's hand. The old man stroked the dog's head with trembling fingers. That's why I got Coda, Earl said. After the war. After everything. I needed something to remind me what loyalty looked like. What it meant to not leave someone behind. He looked at the dog. I trained him myself. Every command. Every discipline. I trained him the way your father trained his Marines. With patience. With consistency. With the understanding that loyalty isn't something you teach. It's something you earn. He wouldn't leave you, Harry said. On the highway, his leg was shattered and he crawled through broken glass to get to your face. He wouldn't let anyone touch you until I talked him down. Earl's chin trembled. That's because I never left him. Not once in 7 years. He sleeps beside my bed, rides beside me in the truck, goes where I go. I made him a promise the day I brought him home. What promise? That I'd never leave him behind, the way men get left behind in war. Earl's hand tightened on Coda's fur. And he made me the same promise back, in his own way. Harry looked at the dog lying on the cold hospital floor with a shattered leg and a splint and a body full of pain, pressed against the bed of the man he'd nearly died protecting. Earl, what were you doing on I-70? Where were you going? The old man went quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that meant the answer was going to hurt. I was coming to find you, Earl said. Harry's blood went cold. What? I was driving to Colorado Springs, to the VA hospital. I knew your father died there. I figured somebody, a nurse, a chaplain, someone, might know where his family ended up. Earl's eyes found Harry's. I've been looking for you for 2 years, Harry. Looking for me? Why? Because I made a promise to your father. What promise? Earl's hand found Harry's wrist. His grip was weak, barely any pressure, but his eyes held a force that made Harry's chest ache. The night before Fallujah, the night before the convoy, your daddy and I were sitting together, and he showed me a picture of you, a baby, a few months old. And he said, Earl's voice cracked, broke, came back in pieces. He said, if I don't make it back, find my boy. Make sure he knows his old man loved him. And I said I would. I promised him. Harry pulled his hand free, stood up, walked 3 steps away, stopped. His back was to Earl. His shoulders were shaking. He pressed both hands over his face and fought for control the way his father had probably fought for control 1,000 times, silently, desperately, alone. "He made it back," Harry said. His voice was muffled by his hands. "He came home. He raised me. He was there." "I know, but the promise didn't die just because he survived. That's not how promises work, Harry. Not the real ones." Earl's voice steadied. "Your father carried me out of Fallujah. I spent 20 years carrying his words. And when I found out he was gone, when I finally tracked down his obituary 6 months ago, I knew I had to find you. Had to look you in the face and tell you what he asked me to tell you." Harry lowered his hands, turned around. "What?" Earl's eyes were streaming. His monitors were beeping too fast. A nurse would come soon, but the old man didn't care about any of that. "Your father loved you, Harry. He loved you more than his own life. He loved you enough to run into gunfire for a stranger, because he knew that if he died doing the right thing, his boy would understand someday why it mattered." Harry's knees gave out. He sat down hard in the chair, put his head in his hands. Coda moved, slowly, painfully. The dog dragged himself around the bed until he reached Harry, pushed his nose against Harry's knee, pressed his forehead against Harry's leg. And Harry Reeves, highway patrol officer, Marine's son, the boy in the photograph that a soldier carried into battle, put his hand on a broken dog's head and cried for the first time since his father's funeral. Earl watched them, the young man and the old dog, both wounded, both holding on. "I was coming to find you," Earl said again, softer now. "And I crashed. And Coda," he looked at his dog, "Coda did what I trained him to do, what your father would have done. He stayed. He fought. He refused to leave." "He saved your life." "No." Earl shook his head. "Your father saved my life, 20 years ago. Coda just carried the debt forward." Harry lifted his head. His face was wet. His eyes were red. But his voice was steady when he spoke. "My father never told me about Fallujah." "No, he wouldn't have." "Why not?" Earl looked at him with the eyes of a man who'd carried shrapnel and guilt and gratitude in equal measure for 2 decades. "Because heroes don't tell their own stories, Harry. They just live them. And then, if they're lucky, someone else tells the story for them." Coda laid his head on Harry's boot and closed his eyes. Harry didn't go home that night, or the next. He called his sergeant, told him he was taking personal days. Didn't explain why. Couldn't. How do you explain to your commanding officer that you pulled a dying man out of a wreck on I-70, and that dying man turned out to be the soldier your father carried out of Fallujah 20 years ago? And now you're sleeping in a hospital chair next to a dog with a broken leg, because leaving feels like betrayal. You don't. You just say, "personal days," and hope nobody asks questions. Earl slept most of the first 48 hours. The swelling in his brain needed time to recede. Doctors came and went. Nurses checked vitals every 2 hours. Harry sat in the corner and watched and waited, and thought about everything Earl had told him, and everything his father had never said. Coda didn't move from Earl's bedside. Dr. Marsh came back twice to check the splint, change the bandages, assess the fracture. She told Harry the dog needed surgery within 72 hours or the leg would have to come off. "How much?" Harry asked. "The surgery? With pins and rehab? Probably 4,000, maybe 5. "I'll cover it." Dr. Marsh looked at him. "That's a lot of money for someone else's dog, officer." "That dog saved a man who saved my father. The money doesn't matter." She studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I'll schedule it for Thursday. He'll need to be transported to my clinic." "He won't leave Earl." Then we wait until Earl can tell him it's okay. Dr. Marsh knelt beside Coda, checked his eyes, his gums, the swelling around the fracture. He's in pain, more than he's showing. Dogs like this, working dogs, loyal dogs, they hide it. They'll stand on a broken bone until it kills them if they think someone needs them. I know the type, Harry said quietly. On the third morning, Earl woke up clear. Harry knew the moment it happened, because Coda knew first. The dog's head came up sharp. His ears went forward. His tail thumped once against the floor. Harry looked up from the cold coffee he'd been staring into and saw Earl's eyes, focused this time, present. The fog burned away. Harry. Earl's voice was rough but steady. You're still here? Yes, sir. How long? 3 days. Earl processed that. Looked down at Coda. The dog had risen onto his front legs, broken hind legs splinted and useless, pressing his forehead against the mattress near Earl's hand. Hey, boy. Earl's fingers found Coda's ears, scratched gently. The dog's whole body shuddered with relief. Hey, I'm here. I'm right here. Coda made a sound that wasn't a cry this time, something closer to a sigh, like a soldier finally standing down after a long watch. He needs surgery, Harry said. His leg, it's bad, Earl. Compound fracture. If we don't operate in the next 24 hours, they'll have to amputate. Earl's hand tightened on Coda's fur. No, they're not taking his leg. I've arranged it. Dr. Marsh, the vet who splinted him. She's good. She can do it tomorrow if we get him to her clinic. I can't pay for. It's handled. Earl looked at Harry. The same look he'd had that first morning, searching, measuring, seeing someone else's face behind Harry's. You don't owe me anything, son. This isn't about owing. This is about doing what's right. My father would have done it. Your father. Earl closed his eyes, opened them. I need to tell you the rest of the story, Harry. The part I didn't finish. You need to rest. I've been resting for 3 days, and I've been carrying this for 20 years. Earl shifted in the bed, winced. His hand stayed on Coda. After Fallujah, after your father carried me out, they medevaced me to Landstuhl, Germany. I was in the hospital for 6 weeks. Shrapnel in my leg, infection in the shoulder wound. They weren't sure I'd keep the arm. But you did. I did. Because every day in that hospital, I thought about Tommy Reeves running into that alley. I thought about a man who had a baby son at home, choosing to come back for me when every rule, every protocol, every instinct told him to keep running the other direction. Earl's jaw set. I decided if he could do that for me, I could damn well fight to keep my arm. Harry said nothing, just listened. When I got stateside, they discharged me, medical. I went home to Grand Junction, tried to be normal, tried to do the civilian thing, job, house, routine. But I couldn't sleep, couldn't close my eyes without hearing the gunfire, couldn't walk into a room without checking the exits, couldn't. Earl stopped. His breathing had quickened. Coda pressed closer, whined softly. It's okay, boy. Earl steadied himself, looked at Harry. You know what I'm talking about. I watched my father go through it, every night, for years. Then you know it doesn't go away. It just gets quieter, sometimes. Earl swallowed. I was in bad shape, Harry, real bad. The kind of bad where you start thinking about permanent solutions to temporary problems. Harry's gut tightened. I sat in my truck one night with a loaded .45 on the passenger seat. 2011. 3 years after I lost contact with your father. No family, no friends who understood. Nobody left who knew what I'd been through. Earl's voice was barely audible. I sat there for 2 hours, had the barrel in my hand. Earl, let me finish, please. The old man's eyes were dry now, past tears. In that still, calm place on the other side of the worst a man can feel. I was sitting there, and I looked at the passenger seat, and there was a newspaper. I don't even remember buying it, but it was folded open to the classifieds, and there was an ad. German Shepherd puppies, working line, police and military stock. Earl looked down at Coda. I don't know why I put the gun down. Don't know why I drove to that breeder's farm instead of doing what I'd planned. But I walked in, and there were 6 puppies. And 5 of them were climbing all over each other playing. And one was sitting apart, alone, quiet, watching me with brown eyes that looked like they'd already seen too much for an 8-week-old animal. Coda. Coda. Earl's voice broke on the name. I picked him up, and he put his head on my chest, and he sighed. Like he'd been waiting, like he knew I was coming, and he'd been holding a spot for me. Harry looked at the dog. Coda was watching Earl with absolute attention, ears forward, eyes locked, as if he understood every word. I took him home, started training him the next day, and for the first time since Fallujah, I had a reason to get up in the morning. Something that depended on me, something that needed me to be strong, even when I didn't feel strong. Earl's hand stroked the dog's head slowly. I trained him the way your father trained his squad. Patience, consistency, clear commands, and one rule above everything. What rule? Never leave your man behind. Earl held Harry's gaze. I'd say it every day, every walk, every drill. Never leave your man behind, Coda. And he learned it, not like a trick, like a code, like a belief, down in his bones where it can't be shaken loose. Harry thought about the highway, the broken glass, the 85-pound dog dragging himself on a shattered leg to reach an unconscious man's face. He learned it, Harry said. He saved my life twice, Harry. Once in that truck, and once 7 years ago in a parked Ford with a .45 on the seat. Earl's eyes filled again. That dog is the reason I'm alive. Both times. The room was quiet, except for the beeping monitors and Coda's steady breathing. Earl, Harry said carefully, you said you've been looking for me for 2 years. I found your father's obituary online, 6 months ago. Started searching from there. Public records, military databases. I knew Tommy had a son named Harry. Knew he was in Colorado. But Reeves is a common name, and I'm a 71-year-old man who can barely work a computer. So you drove? So I drove. Figured I'd start at the VA hospital where he died. Ask around. Somebody had to know where his family ended up. Earl shook his head slowly. I didn't plan on flipping my truck on I-70. What happened? The crash? Earl went quiet. Too quiet. Earl. A deer. Jumped the guardrail right in front of me. I swerved, hit the rail. The truck went over. He paused. But that's not the whole truth. What's the whole truth? I shouldn't have been driving. My eyes aren't what they were. My reflexes are slow. Doctor told me 6 months ago to stop driving at night. Earl's jaw worked. I drove anyway, because I was running out of time, and I needed to find Tommy's boy before... He stopped. Before what? Earl didn't answer immediately. He looked at Coda, at the monitors, at his own hands lying on the hospital blanket, scarred, aged, shaking slightly. Earl, before what? I'm sick, Harry. The words came out flat, factual, the way a soldier reports casualties. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, diagnosed 8 months ago. They gave me a year, maybe less. The bottom dropped out of Harry's stomach. That's why I was driving at night in a snowstorm to a hospital 200 miles from home? Because I've got maybe 4 months left, and I couldn't die without keeping my promise to your father. Harry stood up, walked to the window, put both hands on the sill, and leaned forward. The weight of it crashed down on him. His father's silence, Earl's search, Coda's loyalty, the cancer, the crash. All of it converging on a highway at dusk, like something planned by a hand he couldn't see. 4 months, Harry said, if I'm lucky. And Coda? The silence that followed was the worst one yet. That's the other reason I was looking for you. Earl's voice was steady, too steady. The steadiness of a man who's rehearsed something painful so many times it's worn smooth. When I die, Coda will have nobody. No family, no home. He'll end up in a shelter. And a dog like him, a dog who's been trained for one person, who bonds the way he bonds, he won't survive that. He'll stop eating, stop moving. He'll lie down and wait to die. Harry turned from the window. I was going to ask you, Earl said, if I could find you. I was going to ask Tommy's son to take my dog. Because Coda was raised on your father's legacy, and I figured if anyone in this world would understand what that means, it'd be you. Harry looked at the German shepherd, lying on the cold hospital floor with a shattered leg and a heart so loyal it had nearly killed him. Looked at the old soldier in the bed who'd spent 20 years carrying a debt and 7 years carrying a dog and 8 months carrying a death sentence, all to keep a promise made in a war zone to a man who never came home the same. You want me to take him? I'm asking you to take him, not because you owe me, because he deserves someone who'll love him the way I did, the way your father loved the men he served with. Earl's voice finally cracked. I can't die worrying about my dog, Harry. I can't. It's the one thing I can't carry. Coda lifted his head, looked at Harry. Those brown eyes, the same eyes that had begged him on the highway, that had waited outside surgical doors, that had refused to close until the man they loved was safe. Harry knelt beside the dog, put his hand on Coda's head, felt the warmth, the weight, the trust. Yeah, Harry said. His voice was rough as gravel. Yeah, Earl. I'll take him. Earl's face collapsed. Not in grief this time, in relief. Pure, bone-deep, final relief. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you, son. Coda pushed his head into Harry's hand, closed his eyes, and Harry knelt there on the hospital floor beside a dying man's dog, feeling something settle into place that he hadn't known was missing. A connection to his father that went deeper than memory, deeper than grief, deeper than the silence Tommy Reeves had carried to his grave. A chain of loyalty, forged in combat, carried by a dog, handed to a son who didn't know he was waiting for it. Coda's surgery lasted 3 hours. Harry sat in the waiting room of Dr. Marsh's clinic with his elbows on his knees and his head in his hands, and his phone turned off, because he couldn't handle one more thing demanding his attention while a dog he'd known for 5 days was on a table, fighting to keep his leg. Earl wasn't there. Couldn't be. He was still in the hospital, too weak to be moved, connected to machines that measured the slow, steady work of a body trying to heal itself one more time. But he'd made Harry promise to call the moment Coda was out. He'll know, Earl had said that morning when Harry came to take the dog. He'll know I'm not there, and he'll be scared. Talk to him, Harry, the whole time. Don't let him think he's alone. So Harry had talked. In the car on the way to the clinic, with Coda lying across the back seat, splinted leg elevated on a folded blanket, brown eyes watching Harry in the rearview mirror. He talked about nothing, The weather, the road, the mountains. Talked about his patrol routes. Talked about the time he'd chased a runaway horse down I-70 for 6 miles at 40 miles an hour, while dispatch laughed so hard she couldn't give directions. Coda had listened, ears forward, eyes steady. The way a dog listens when the words don't matter, but the voice does. At the clinic, when Dr. Marsh's team came to take him back, Coda had looked at Harry. One look, long and direct, and full of something that went past animal instinct into territory Harry didn't have a word for. "I'll be here," Harry said. "Right here, when you wake up." The dog had gone with the technicians without a sound. Now Harry sat in a plastic chair in a veterinary waiting room, surrounded by pet food posters and vaccination schedules, and he thought about his father. Tommy Reeves had never talked about the war, but he talked about loyalty. In his own way, in the things he did instead of the things he said. The way he showed up to every one of Harry's baseball games, even when the chemo was eating him alive. The way he sat on the porch every evening and watched the sun go down like he was grateful for each one. The way he'd look at Harry sometimes with an expression that was too big for a kitchen table or a backyard or a Tuesday afternoon. An expression that belonged in a war zone, in an alley in Fallujah, in the space between a bullet and a body. Harry understood that expression now. It was the look of a man who'd paid for his life with someone else's courage, and who spent every day afterward trying to earn it. "Officer Reeves?" Harry's head snapped up. Dr. Marsh stood in the doorway, scrubs, tired eyes, but she was almost smiling. "He's out. Surgery went well. 2 titanium pins in the tibia. The bones aligned. Barring infection, he should make a full recovery." "He'll walk?" "He'll walk. He'll run. He'll probably do things on that leg that'll make me nervous, because that dog doesn't seem to understand the concept of limits." Dr. Marsh leaned against the doorframe. "He's waking up now. You can see him." Harry stood so fast, the chair scraped back and hit the wall. Coda was lying on a padded mat in the recovery area, his hind leg wrapped in clean white bandages and a rigid splint. His eyes were open, glassy from the anesthesia, unfocused but searching, looking for something. Someone. Harry knelt beside him. "Hey boy, I'm here." Coda's eyes found him, locked on, and the dog's tail moved. 1 thump. 2. 3. "You did good." Harry put his hand on Coda's neck, felt the heartbeat. Strong, steady. "You did so good. Earl's going to be proud of you." At the sound of Earl's name, Coda's ears went forward. He tried to lift his head. "Easy, he's okay. He's waiting for you. We'll go see him tomorrow." Coda settled back. His eyes stayed on Harry's face. And Harry had the strangest feeling, one he couldn't explain to anyone and wouldn't try, that the dog was assessing him, measuring him, deciding if this new person was worth the same trust he'd given Earl. "I'm going to take care of you," Harry said quietly. "That's the deal. Earl asked me, and I said yes, and I keep my word. Same as my father. Same as you." Coda's eyes closed. His body relaxed. Trust. Harry called Earl from the clinic parking lot. "He's out. Surgery's clean. 2 pins. Doc says he'll walk." The silence on the other end lasted so long, Harry checked to make sure the call was still connected. "Earl?" "I'm here." The old man's voice was thick, wrecked. "He's going to be okay?" "He's going to be fine." "You promise?" "I promise." Another silence. Then Earl laughed, a wet, broken, grateful sound. "Your father would have said the same thing. Exact same tone. I promise. Like it was a blood oath instead of 2 words. Maybe it is. Yeah. Earl's voice softened. Maybe it is. Earl came home from the hospital 9 days after the crash. Harry drove him, not to Grand Junction, not to the empty house 200 miles away, but to Harry's apartment in Colorado Springs. A 1-bedroom that suddenly had a hospital bed in the living room, a dog bed beside it, and a 71-year-old veteran who'd argued about the arrangement the entire drive. I'm not putting you out of your home, Harry. You're not. I'm putting you in it. I have my own place. You have an empty house 200 miles away, no family, and 4 months. You're staying here. Earl had gone quiet at that. The 4 months landed the way it always did. Heavy, final. A door closing at the end of a hallway you couldn't turn around in. I don't want you watching me die, son. Too bad. Harry's hands tightened on the wheel. My father died in a VA hospital with nobody but me. No friends, no squad mates, no brothers, just his son and a nurse, and a room that smelled like antiseptic. I'm not letting that happen twice. Harry, you came looking for me because my father asked you to. You drove through a snowstorm to keep a 20-year-old promise. The least I can do is make sure you don't keep it from a hospital bed with strangers. Earl pressed his hand over his eyes. His shoulders shook once, twice. Your father raised a good man, he said finally. He raised a stubborn one. There's a difference. No. Earl lowered his hand. His eyes were red but clear. There's not. Coda healed faster than anyone expected. Within 3 weeks, he was walking on the repaired leg. Cautiously at first, favoring it, testing it the way you test ice on a frozen pond. By 6 weeks, he was trotting beside Harry on morning patrols around the apartment complex, his gait uneven but determined. By 8 weeks, he was running. Dr. Marsh called it remarkable. Harry called it stubbornness. Earl called it exactly what he'd expected. That dog doesn't know how to quit, Earl said from his bed, watching Coda chase a tennis ball Harry had thrown across the living room. Same as your father. Same as you. It's in the bloodline now. The 4 months became 3, then 2. Earl weakened slowly, then fast. The cancer did what cancer does, took things piece by piece. His appetite, his strength, his ability to walk to the bathroom without help. Harry adjusted, took leave, moved his desk to the living room so he could work on reports while Earl slept. Learned to cook the bland, soft foods Earl could keep down. Learned the medication schedule. Learned the difference between a bad day and a bad day. Coda never left Earl's side. When Earl could walk, the dog walked beside him. When Earl was in bed, the dog lay on the floor with his head touching the mattress. When Earl slept, Coda watched. When Earl woke, Coda was the first thing he saw. He knows, Earl told Harry one evening near the end of the 2nd month. His voice was thin now, paper thin. Dogs always know. Know what? When it's time. Earl's hand rested on Coda's head. The dog's eyes were closed, but his ears twitched at every word. He's not going to leave me, Harry. Not until the last second. And then he's going to need you to be there. Right there. So he can transfer. Transfer? His loyalty, his love, his whole heart. Dogs like Coda, they can't exist without someone to serve. When I go, he's going to look for the next person worth following. Earl's eyes found Harry's. Be that person. I will. Promise me. I promise. The way your father promised. Blood oath. Blood oath, Earl. The old soldier smiled. It was the same lopsided grin from the photograph, the one Harry had carried in his pocket since the night of the crash, and now kept on his nightstand where he could see it every morning. Good, Earl whispered. That's good. Earl Whitman died on a Tuesday, 3:47 a.m. Harry was asleep in the chair beside the bed. He woke to the sound of Coda crying. That sound, the same sound from the highway, from the wrecked truck, from the night this all began. Low, broken, guttural. The sound of an animal who understood exactly what was happening. Harry reached for Earl's hand. It was still warm, but the chest wasn't moving. The monitors Harry had learned to read were flat. "Earl?" Harry's voice cracked. "Earl!" Nothing. Coda pulled himself onto the bed. Broken protocol, broken rules. He'd never gotten on the bed before. But he climbed up now, 85 pounds of muscle and grief, and he lay down beside Earl Whitman and pressed his head against the old man's chest, right over his heart. And he stayed there. Harry didn't move him, didn't try. He sat in his chair and held Earl's cooling hand and let the dog say goodbye the only way he knew how. With his whole body, his whole heart, his whole broken, beautiful, unshakable loyalty. 20 minutes. That's how long they stayed like that. 3 souls in a room. 1 gone, 2 remaining. The silence so complete that Harry could hear his own heartbeat and Coda's breathing and the absence of Earl's. Then Coda lifted his head. He looked at Harry. Those brown eyes, the eyes that had begged on a highway, waited outside surgical doors, watched over a dying man for 2 months, found Harry's face, and held. Harry reached out, put his hand on the dog's head. "I'm here, boy," he said. "I've got you. I've got you now." Coda moved, slowly, carefully. He climbed down from the bed and walked to Harry and put his head on Harry's knee. The transfer Earl had talked about. Not taught, not commanded, just given. Like a torch passed in the dark from one hand to the next, Harry buried his face in the dog's fur and held on. They buried Earl with military honors. Full detail, folded flag, rifle salute. Harry arranged it through the VA. Staff Sergeant Earl Whitman, United States Marine Corps, veteran of Fallujah, recipient of the Purple Heart. The headstone was placed 30 yards from another one Harry knew by heart. Staff Sergeant Thomas Reeves, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines. Beloved father. Side by side, brothers in the ground the way they'd been brothers in the sand. Harry stood between the 2 headstones, with Coda sitting beside him. The dog was healed now, strong. His leg carried a slight limp that Dr. Marsh said would never fully go away, a permanent reminder of the night he'd dragged himself through broken glass to keep a dying man alive. "He found me, Dad," Harry said to his father's headstone. "Just like you asked him to. Took him 20 years, but he found me." Wind moved through the cemetery. Coda's ears shifted. "And he left me something." Harry put his hand on the dog's head. "He left me the best part of himself. Same thing you did." Coda looked up at Harry. Steady. Patient. Ready. Harry knelt between the 2 graves. One hand on Coda, one hand on the grass above his father's heart. "I'll take care of him," he said. "The way you took care of Earl. The way Earl took care of Coda. The way Coda took care of everybody." He stood, straightened his uniform, looked down at the dog who'd been passed from one generation of loyalty to the next, like a living, breathing promise. "Come on, boy. Let's go home." Coda walked beside him, step for step, shoulder to hip. The limp barely visible now, just a hitch in his stride, a slight hesitation that said, "I was broken once, and I healed, and I'm still here." They walked out of the cemetery together, a Marine's son and a soldier's dog, carrying forward a chain of courage that started in an alley in Fallujah and survived a highway crash and a hospital vigil, and a quiet death in a Colorado apartment. Some promises don't end when the people who made them are gone. They live on, in the hands that carry the flag, in the hearts that remember the sacrifice, in the loyalty of a dog who learned one rule above all others, and never, not once, broke it. Never leave your man behind. Coda never did, and neither would Harry. Thank you for staying until the very end. This story was written for the ones who've loved fiercely, served quietly, and kept promises that nobody else knew about. For the veterans who carry silence. For the dogs who carry everything else. If this story touched you, hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe. Tell me what moment broke your heart. Tell me what moment put it back together. Your words are the reason these stories exist. And to every person who's ever been someone's reason to keep going, thank you. You matter more than you'll ever know.